La 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 la. Hey there, everybody. This is Ask Dr. Fish. We are taking just a second to deal with some technical difficulties on the Facebook page. La 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 la. But we will be there shortly. Hey there, everybody. This is Ask Dr. Fish. We are taking just a second to deal with some technical difficulties on the Facebook page. La 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 la. But we will be there shortly. Hey there, everybody. This is Ask Dr. Fish. We are taking just a second to deal with some technical difficulties on the Facebook page. La 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 la. But we will be there shortly. Hey there, everybody. This is Ask Dr. Fish. We are taking just a second to deal with some technical difficulties on the Facebook page. I think the technical difficulties might be cleared up. But we will be there shortly. Hey there, everybody. I believe that could be taken care of, but I will reload the Facebook page. In the meantime, I encourage everybody who's on Facebook, who may or may not be able to hear me, to check out the related events on the Ask Dr. Fish event page. Some critical related events, including there we go. No, we are live. We are live. Five Alive, Johnny Five Alive. So that is good. Way to show the problems. Oh, I was not supposed to. Well, anyway, here we are. All right. Well, are we good? Shall we do the thing? I can't hear anybody except me.
I know you can't hear everybody. Hi, everybody. All right. Stuart, do you have your music queued up?
Oh, I got the whole thing.
All right.
All right. Give me the Wayne's World. 5, 4, 3. What have scientists learned about the effect of ice on Midwest fish? Why is it important to have a fishing license anyway? And how exactly does a stingray get pregnant? And how exactly does a stingray get pregnant? To find out, let's ask Dr. Fish. That's right, it is Ask Dr. Fish from Illinois, Indiana, Sea Grant, Wisconsin, Sea Grant, and your pals at Goby Dog Media. This is our every other month live stream in which we ask our doctors fish your fish questions, your science questions, and your life questions. And so I'm so happy to welcome our doctors fish today. We'll start with Titus Heilman. Titus is the fisheries extension specialist or something along those lines at Wisconsin Sea Grant. Titus, are you eclipsing or what today?
Well, I'm gonna go outside and see what I can see if it's not cloudy. But
if it's not cloudy, yes. The Midwest, first of the Midwest eclipse. Katie O'Reilly, Dr. Catfish with Illinois, Indiana, Sea Grant, aquatic invasive species outreach specialist. Looking cool. Are those glasses just your usual attire? Or are you can unmute too.
I was gonna say I'm so excited about the eclipse. Yeah, just my usual everyday Monday attire.
Yeah, it's because your star eclipses us all, Katie. So this is the deal. We're live on Facebook and YouTube if you're watching us live. And we are live on Facebook and YouTube if you're watching us live. Carolyn says my music is too loud. I turned it down. Gee whiz. She's just getting ready for those teenage years coming up. But anyway, so if you're on Facebook right now watching us, or if you're on youtube.com right now watching us, you can post your own fish questions, science questions, or life questions into the chat. And if not, you can send us an email, askdrfish@gmail.com. That works as well. And we'll give out our fish hotline later in the show. But we have some important news to get to. The first one is the fact that it's only freezing most of the days right now, and I've only worn my winter coat 3 times in the last week, must indicate that spring is coming. And with spring, things are starting to change ecologically speaking. So one of the things we talk about a lot is lake ice and how there was lower lake ice this year than in past years. And all that lake ice is probably gone now that spring is nigh. So what exactly is going to be the effect? Scientists have studied this lately, right, Titus? And what have they found about the effect of lake ice or decreasing lake ice on fish?
Yeah, so it's some new research out just in the last month or so showing that the ice is coming off the lakes earlier than it used to be. So basically what we're seeing with winter lake ice, it's freezing up later. coming off earlier. And the concern here is that there might be kind of a mismatch for these hatching little fish. And yeah, so potential problems there.
Yeah, and just to build off that, now that we
little fish.
Titus just really wanted to make that point twice.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But no, what's interesting is, now we're April and we're way past the usual maximum ice level in the Great Lakes. And this year was just historically low, since we began having kind of the most detailed records back in the 1970s. This has been a really rough year for ice lovers, for sure, in the Great Lakes region.
1 second. I figured out what I think an audio issue is that we're having. Let me fix that audio issue. This is unrelated to Titus or to your thing, but let me just get this fixed. All right. I apologize. So where were you, Katie O'Reilly?
Yeah. So we were talking about, this was a historically bad winter for ice lovers in the Great Lakes region. And, like Titus said, this obviously has impacts on fish ecology, but it also has impacts on, everything from the actual environment, like the physical environment. So things like the coast dealing with erosion, but it also impacts kind of winter recreation in the Great Lakes too, like fewer people able to ice fish or go skiing, snowmobiling. So obviously fish is what we care about because they're the best, but there are a lot of other, ecological and kind of social impacts that are resulting from this really historically low ice winter.
Yeah, there's, definitely some specific fish species that, there are these relationships with ice cover. So, species like ciscos, like lake whitefish that are like fall spawners, their eggs are kind of hanging out through the winter. And if you have that ice cover, it helps to protect them through the winter from things like waves. So, losing that ice cover and maybe seeing less of it can be a concern for these species in the long run.
And the social aspect too, though, as a social scientist, I feel compelled to mention it. A lot of what goes into the Midwest identity has to do with the cold, because, we got cold, corn, and some other sea that I can't think of off the top of my head here. And so seeing that disappear, I think can be a bit challenging for something. But that's not the only reason that we want to talk about spring. The main reason we want to talk about spring is to get Titus all fired up. So Titus is, as far as I can tell, based on revealed preferences, which is if you go back at the end of the year and look at how he spends most of his time, it's looking at fish doing what they do in the springtime, if you will. So Titus, who's spawning now?
Yeah, who's spawning? So what
we need imagery for this. We need a title card and I'm writing this down, and a sound for who's spawning now. This will be
maybe some thrashing, splashing water sounds. But if you're watching live, we've got a video. We've got a video up of 2 northern pike that I actually saw on Saturday. So this is, hot off the presses, and it's spring. So some of our first species to spawn are the northern pike. They're coming up into these flooded areas right after the ice goes off. And, this has been a really weird year too. Back in early March, our water was warming up. It was, it was like, this is going to be a super early spring. We actually started our sucker monitoring, our sucker spawning monitoring with Shed Aquarium back in March, like 3 weeks earlier than usual, because the water was already up to about 7.5 degrees Celsius. And of course, then, we got everything set up. We've been monitoring, and it got cold again. And now we're like the water temperature this morning was about 4.5 degrees. So it has not been a super early spring. We're like actually back on track now, I think, to where a normal spring would be, which is in the interesting, weather is interesting. And, it was super warm. Now it's kind of back to normal, I guess.
Yeah, and I'll say I have a spawning update too. In part because I am eclipse hunting. I'm visiting family in Toledo, Ohio, which is home to the Maumee River, where there is a, annual celebration of all things walleye as they come in from Lake Erie into the tributary to spawn, and it has a really big and popular fishing, explosion, to catch the spawners. So similar thing. I remember hearing that back in March, everyone was worried that the walleye run was going to start way earlier than normal. We had a couple weeks of cooler weather. The water levels were really low in the river. But now that we've gotten some warm water, we've also had a lot of rain in kind of Indiana, Ohio area. And so that's really got the walleye run back on track. So just to echo what Titus says, sometimes we think something's going to happen and then weather just takes a turn and somehow it all works out.
What are fish looking for when it comes to knowing when to spawn, right? Is it temperature? Is it photo period? Or is it amount of rain? What are the signals?
Yeah, I'd have to say that it's probably all three, and it also depends on fish species. Like some of what we're trying to learn with the sucker monitoring is what are the cues to trigger the spawning run, and it definitely seems like temperature is a cue for the actual spawning. But I think there's also this stream flow pulse that they're looking for, because really until about a week ago, our water was super low. It was really clear, which was nice for looking for fish, although we weren't seeing any. And then we had over an inch of rain, and now the streams back up. So yeah, I think it's always going to be a combination of those things. And actually with walleye, light might be a part of that, because temperature is important, ice out is important, but hard to know.
Interesting. All right. Well, enough on lake ice. We've done enough lake ice. Let's move on to a perennial loser of the Lakey Awards, the lake sturgeon. And it turns out lake sturgeon, they might be trying to make it endangered or listed as endangered. Katie, what do you know about lake sturgeon, and should they be listed as endangered, or what are the trade-offs there?
Yeah, so this is a really interesting story that, lake sturgeon are not considered, either threatened or endangered officially by the US federal government. Now, different states can put in, whether or not a species is threatened in their particular state. But the federal listing, if you get on the endangered species list, essentially opens up a lot of new opportunities and potentially challenges. So there's, the concern here is that this year, the US government's going to make a ruling on whether or not lake sturgeon should be on the federal endangered species list. And some of the states in the Great Lakes region have some concerns, because that basically introduces, another kind of regulatory body into the management of lake sturgeon. One of the interesting things that I came across while looking at this issue is that in some places the states were basically saying the federal government was a little bit too late. Like there's been so much work and effort put into restoring, both the lake sturgeon and their habitat already. So it's kind of like, closing the door after the horse has left the barn. But I think there's also some major benefits. Getting put on the endangered species list gives the species additional protections, makes really it a priority for states and basically every kind of stakeholder to work in the best interest of the fish. So there's a little bit of conflict between, obviously, I think everybody wants to see healthy populations of lake sturgeon back in the Great Lakes, but the way of going about that is kind of the sticking issue.
Yeah, and I'd add there, I mean, being in Wisconsin, a state that has, really for a long time, since the 70s and even before that, has really invested a lot of time and effort to maintain our lake sturgeon population. And really, the Lake Winnebago system has the largest lake sturgeon population in the world. So, really well managed, supporting a big ice fishery that's, regionally important, and the population's doing really well. To then have, this, how would that work? Like would our really well managed, big population be considered endangered because it's endangered everywhere? Like, that's a big question that I think people have concerned. Also, our Great Lakes populations are a lot lower than they were historically. Like, 1%, like that's the number that I hear. Our current lake sturgeon population is like 1% where it was historically. And, what would that mean for things like, fishing, for bycatch of commercial fisheries who might encounter some of these sturgeon as well, if all of a sudden they're, not just threatened or a special concern, but endangered federally? Like, that could really kind of change how lakes are managed. So, definitely, I think we all agree that we want to see more lake sturgeon in the world, but how that happens, and that's the question moving forward, and what it means for us kind of in the region as well.
What would it mean for you as like a scientist if it were to be declared endangered? Does that make it? My gut feeling is then you have to get more permits, but I don't know. What would the results of that be?
Yeah, so you're spot on, Stuart. Basically, we would need additional permits if we're like, specifically trying to, for example, catch some lake sturgeon to measure them in the field. There also might just be special permits for if you're doing field work that's not centered on lake sturgeon, but there's the chance that you may, potentially catch them as bycatch, as Titus said. So yeah, definitely increased kind of checks and balances to, make sure that the work that you're doing is going to minimize any harm or potential harm to sturgeon.
And I think we could throw in like a counterpoint there on the beneficial side. I think having, there's a lot of like grants and programs that are open to endangered species that would kind of allow us to, then take advantage of those federal programs or federal grants, which could be a benefit to researchers. So, yeah, so that would, it's not all potentially bad, but
right.
Lots of things could happen.
Right. Yeah. Like neither. Yeah. It's definitely not an all good, all bad situation. I think it's thinking about sort of those trade-offs that are inherent in any kind of fisheries management, but especially for a fish that is as iconic and deserving of a lakey as the lake sturgeon.
I would like to thank you for that. So yeah, this is my annual plug, or I don't know, weekly plug for lake sturgeon are awesome. When I was going through undergraduate school at the University of Windsor, one of the discussions was about how being on the endangered species list also means there's more protections for habitat. I did find it really interesting that, the point of like, look, we've been working on this for a really long time already, and we're seeing gains. So it may be too late. I found that was.
Yeah, although it's interesting. I mean, it runs into the question. We don't have to go into the details now, but it brings up that question of what are we trying to restore to, right? And if we're at 1% of where we were, there is, it's not imaginable what having, I guess, 100 times the salmon, or not salmon, sturgeon that we have now are, right? Maybe you'd actually see one, for example, if we had 100 times as many. But it's what are the goalposts, I guess.
Yeah, and as a multiple year runner up for the best Titus of the Great Lakes, Lakey, I feel the lake sturgeon pain, and just being considered is really the reward.
Yeah.
And we'll note that the Lakeys that we're talking about are the Teach Me About the Great Lakes Lakeys, which is
quite possibly not the least prestigious podcast related Great Lakes Awards that there are.
Something like that. Yes. Okay. So I am going to pause here. Thank everybody for their patience as we once again have Facebook mess up. We'll figure that out for next time, I hope. This is Ask Dr. Fish, a show where our two Dr. Fishes answer your fish questions, science questions, and life questions. If you have a question for our doctors, you can put it into the chat right now, either at YouTube or Facebook if you're watching live. Or you can use the Twitter hashtag AskDrFish, and you can email us at askdrfish@gmail.com.
When was the last time one of us checked the Ask Dr. Fish hashtag? I'm going to check that right now. Questions might be pouring in.
Yeah,
You know, rather than do that hashtag, why not just open up your phone, delete the app, delete your Twitter account, and just call that a win, and then ask us some of those different ways.
Yeah.
There you go.
I'll be
All right.
honest, it's not
Okay, that's Dr. Fish. Ask Dr. Fish.
the Ask Dr. Fish hashtag is not ringing off the hook right now. I think it's fair to say.
Okay. I just dropped a link for the Lakeys. And on to our next question. So there was a story, and I'll share it to the screen in a second, about a state in Idaho. There was a tiger trout record. So first off, what's tiger trout? And while I'm pulling things up, tell us about, kind of what tiger trout is and records. And then the record was rescinded because they were caught without a license. So whoever wants to jump in on what is tiger trout?
Yeah, so tiger trout is not like a true species of fish, but it's a hybrid between, I want to say, brook trout and brown trout. Titus, you need to fact check me on that one. But essentially,
You mean as I'm like Googling
as you're Googling it,
look it up, and you are correct. It is brown trout and
yes.
brook trout. So a Salmo and Salvelinus crossover.
Heck yes. Thank you, Titus, for the fact check. But essentially, tiger trout are one of the hybrids, sort of like splake you may have heard of, that are oftentimes artificially raised specifically for angling opportunities, either because they grow faster than either of the parent species. They maybe are hardier and can live in different environments. So,
Katie, how do they get their name though? Like what? I don't get it. Tiger trout. What does that mean?
That's a really good question. My understanding is that tiger trout get it from the sort of appearance that they have, even though the one that is showing the tiger trout in that photo does not look very tigery.
That's more like a cloud leopard trout. We need to have a conversation about this.
We need to get their big cat straight here.
Yeah.
But yeah, supposedly it's more of the coloration and appearance of spots that is sort of tigerish-ish, I guess. But when it comes to, records and sort of getting records rescinded, that really is, I think different places have different rules. Sometimes it's like, based on, I would say oftentimes it's based on fish weight. But so it kind of depends. And obviously, if you don't have a license, you're kind of, I don't know, up a creek, to use that phrase. But because it's a crime. I mean, you're breaking the law in many places if you are not fishing with a license, depending on, who you are.
Why are fishing license important? Like why? I mean, so they cost, like the amount of money it costs depends on where you're going, I guess. But is it important because it's revenue and they need revenue, or is it for tracking people, or what? Why should people want to get a fishing license?
Yeah, so the way a lot of our state departments of natural resources or other agencies that manage wildlife and fish are generally funded mostly or completely by license sales. So it is really, you buying a license is supporting the agency that then, will kind of cover the costs of growing fish in hatcheries, of running those hatcheries, maintaining it, of all the fish biologists and other biologists working around the state to manage these resources. So, the advantage here, and then it also helps, to understand how many people are, out there, chasing after these fish. I make sure that I don't fish that much. I do like to buy a fishing license though, just so I wouldn't get into the problem of catching a 8.47 pound tiger trout and learning that after all, I don't have the record because I was fishing illegally. So yeah, not a great look for anybody there.
No, it's not. Although I point out they need to be more
King.
precise. in the record name, because it's not the record trout, it's the record legal trout, legally caught
Right.
trout. He still caught 8.4 pound trout, 8.4 whatever. But yes, shame, right? Are we allowed to give shame on Ask Dr. Fish? We're publicly funded. If we were allowed to give shame, we would
No.
be shaming.
No,
No,
no.
No, we're not
Okay,
allowed
well,
to give
If we
shame.
were, we would be shaming the person who caught this tiger trout.
No, we're trying to
Illegally.
be understanding and trying to educate.
No, I agree with that. What I'm saying is
about
what we would be doing
you
if we
need a
were
license.
allowed. Right. If we were allowed to
Wait. Where can you get fishing licenses in the states of Illinois, Wisconsin, Michigan, places like that?
Yeah, at least for Illinois, I know you can get them online through the Illinois DNR website. And they also have a list of shops where you could buy one in person as well. And I would guess probably that's similar across many of the Great Lakes states. Is DNR would be your first bet, and either, you know, you can buy it directly from them, or they can recommend places to find them.
Yeah, definitely places like bait shops or tackle shops. If you're going into one of those, you know, they're probably going to sell you, if they sell things like fishing poles, they probably sell you a fishing license as well. So, but you know, you can't beat the ease of buying online. So once you get that set up, and you know, also, you know, if you're like, okay, I've got my Wisconsin fishing license, but I can't just, you know, say, hey, I'm going to go fishing anywhere now. You know, outside of the state, you do also need, you know, each state licenses its fisheries. In some cases, like if you have a shared waterway, like the Menominee River between Wisconsin and Michigan, they might have specific rules there that, you know, because there's that line is just an imaginary line in the river. So you might have to have a, you know, special license. Maybe it's allowed that you can fish in both of those. So yeah, definitely, you know, out of state licenses are going to be something. If you're traveling, you can purchase those. A lot of times can be different lengths of time too. So, hey, if you're just going fishing for a day, they may have a single day out of state license that you can use and, you know, go out, catch your fish, and then you're all good and legal. So, you know, lots of options. There's also things like stamps that will support specific species. Like here in Wisconsin, we have an inland brook trout, like an inland trout stamp. So if you're going to go trout fishing on a stream, you need to have that stamp, which is like $10. If you're going to go out on the Great Lakes and catch trout and salmon, you're going to need a Great Lakes salmon stamp. And that money specifically goes to like the hatcheries and the management of the Great Lakes fisheries. So, you know, that's the way they can kind of identify specific fisheries that might need an extra bit of management. And you can also track how many people are actually fishing there, unless you're like me and you don't actually fish. Although I have started just kind of dragging a lure when I'm out paddling on Lake Michigan in my canoe. Yet to catch anything yet, but it makes me feel like, oh, you know, I'm a fishery specialist. I'm fishing on the Great Lakes. I've paid for my salmon stamp, so I'm getting my money's worth there.
That's cool.
Basically, I'm legit.
You're
Yeah. I mean, sure, I don't. Yeah, too legit to quit. Stuart's got it right, and maybe I should quit fishing because I never catch anything. But hey,
that's why they call it fishing.
This reminds me a little bit of when we used to sample on the western basin of Lake Erie. Katie was talking about the Maumee earlier. We used to drive around sampling before the mayflies hatched, and we had to carry around, because we were going into international waters, we had to carry around these little pieces of paper that were like, anyway, they were like basically like tissue paper, and we pretty much all thought that if they'd flown off the boat, we would not have been able to show that like we're allowed to be here. But yeah, you got like the pictures at like Kinko's or whatever. Anyway, we will reset right now. Thank you everyone for joining us. This is Ask Dr. Fish, a show where our two Dr. Fishes answer your fish questions, science question, and life questions. If you have a question, the easiest thing is to put it into the chat right now, probably. You can also email us at askdrfish@gmail.com. So we have a series. Feel free to put a question if you want to. We're going to run through a couple of different topics, though. In our overall thing, we were talking about a stingray. Stuart, do you want to introduce this story?
I do. This one is big, especially with it being the Easter season. Everybody's got immaculate conception on the mind. And so we have Charlotte the Stingray. I'm not honestly a huge Charlotte the Stingray expert, but Charlotte got pregnant, and exactly how was kind of a mystery, right? So this is in Charlotte, North Carolina. And they have let me try that again. This is a stingray named Charlotte in Hendersonville, North Carolina. I didn't know that there were other words associated with North Carolina other than Charlotte, and I suppose Charleston, where my sister lives. But anyway, and so they found out that Charlotte was pregnant. Minor issue, no other male stingrays in the aquarium. Titus, have you ever... Nope, let me not ask that question. Titus, what can you tell us about stingrays, and is this parthenogenesis or random pregnancy or what?
Yeah, so stingrays are an interesting group of species, kind of more, I guess primitive than some of our other more developed fish, at least. So they potentially here parthenogenesis is the answer. So looking at some asexual reproduction happening with this female just kind of producing an egg and then somehow fertilizing it herself with some kind of DNA.
Some kind of DNA.
And, yeah, I mean, and I know Katie can explain this better than I can.
Thanks, Titus. Well, I was going to also say it's not. I would say I wasn't surprised when I heard about it because we've observed this parthenogenesis in a lot of other sharks, which are a close relative of stingrays. So to me, it was kind of like, okay, this is a species that's related to a species that we know does this. Parthenogenesis is not just in fish; it's been observed in other, terrestrial organisms such as different types of reptiles. And I think right now we don't have a great sense of why it happens. But it's possible it could be sort of a stress response. It could be just, that is a strategy of species, like just naturally that I think in some cases we just haven't been looking for it. So it's not necessarily like that it's something new or strange. It's just something that maybe happens every now and then. But unless you're in a situation where you just have like a single female in a tank and you're like, uh-oh, there's babies, where'd they come from? It's not something that's going to stand out to you in nature.
How would you even track that in the real world?
Right.
It's like maybe they're doing this all the time or sometimes just because they're isolated or something, and it's hard to know.
Yeah. If Titus isn't out there videoing it, then probably nobody.
It doesn't happen. Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
But I mean, really, I know what you're trying to say, Katie. It's kind of lonely in the aquarium, right?
Exactly.
When you're the only stingray looking for companionship, sometimes you got to parthenogenesize, I suppose.
Right. And you're just like, I need a bunch of little mini-me's. And,
Little mini-me's. That's
I
exactly
think
what kids are, too. It's just like little mini-me's.
well, and it's funny. I mean, Charlotte was famous enough to make it to SNL. So I think it was a case of fish breaking into the mainstream a little bit.
Here we go. Breaking into the mainstream. That is excellent. All right. And then we also like to be topical. We are, if not extremely topical on Ask Dr. Fish. And so the next news item is today is the day of the solar eclipse. As soon as we hang up the phone here, I'm going to drive down and sit in traffic on a local state road and watch the eclipse happen over me as I get increasingly irate with the traffic and the children in the car. Or maybe it'll not work out that way, but I have my suspicions. Anyway, that got me to thinking, and it got the people at Game and Fish magazine to thinking, how will the eclipse affect fish? We're talking about spawning and stuff like that, and they're looking to light for signals. Katie, what do you know about fish and solar eclipses?
Yeah, so we don't know a whole ton. There was some work done in one of the last solar eclipses back in 2017, where some people were making observations, not just of fish, but kind of animal behavior in general. And there is some sort of anecdotal angler reports that it's, once the sky went totally dark, so if you're in that path of totality, that the fish bite was a little bit better. And that might be because some species like sort of the lower light conditions like dusk. And so if you are out there fishing, sky goes dark, and that even if it's just a few minutes, maybe it's enough for a fish to go after your lure. But I mean, the tough part is it's such a short period of time. Like here in Toledo at the edge of the band of totality, we're getting like a minute and 30 seconds. So like, is that really enough to trigger any of those behaviors, or is it more just like a big cloud passing by? I guess we'll see.
Yeah, or you imagine a really big thunderstorm, one of those big storms when the streetlights go on in the middle of the day. So of course there you'd have like atmospheric pressure, and that could trigger things. And yeah, it's definitely one of these things. I know I've seen some other scientists, they're going to look at what are the honeybees doing during this. And I think it's just kind of a great opportunity to maybe learn something new about these species, like our stingrays becoming pregnant on their own. There's always things that we can learn. So maybe we'll learn something new. Maybe I'll go out there and see if the suckers start swimming by because it's getting darker. But it's also only going to be 86% here, I think. So really not going to notice a lot of it. So
that's not enough to get those suckers wiggling, is it?
That's right. They're not interested.
So maybe if you're out watching the eclipse today, take a few moments to not, stare at the sun directly and see if there's weird stuff happening around you.
That's where you were going with that.
That's where I was going with that.
Take advantage of the darkness. 4 minutes.
You got 4 minutes. 4 minutes of darkness. Do what you want with it.
Fantastic.
And what you want is to look at the little critters that are running around you.
Exactly, Carolyn. Exactly.
Oh man, we need that. We really need that who's spawning now imaging. All right, I'll get that ready for next time, except I'll probably forget.
No, we really don't.
No, we
No,
do.
we really don't.
I mean, it's actually a huge internal debate on the Ask Dr. Fish team. Our Slack is just blowing up right now with whether or not we need that. The good news is I kind of get to decide. So,
Say, this
I
is
have
not
the sound
a
effect.
democracy.
So yeah. Carol's gonna
Okay.
be muting me. Ah, mute, 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 mute.
I don't think I
All
have
right.
time to
She'll be
do that.
jumping for that
So-
like a sucker in an eclipse.
So we have another topical 100,000 live salmon spilled off a truck. Most landed in a creek and lived. I know this is another thing you're excited about, Stuart. So
It
what do you
is.
think?
Well, the main reason I'm excited about this, so first of all, they have pictures, and the most important thing is everybody was fine, right? And so a tanker was carrying young salmon, but the main reason, those were not fine. Those specific
I was
salmon.
going to say most were fine.
Most. That's not most. How old are those? By looking at them, Titus, you're kind of a salmon guy, right? How old would you say those are?
I mean, do we know what kind? Are there Chinook smolts? So, generally you would stock a Chinook the following like spring. So they're only, 6 months old at stocking time.
Okay. And how many do you stock? Like, I mean, so what would a normal stocking be? Like, I mean, it's thousands upon thousands, right?
Yeah, I mean tens, if not hundreds of thousands.
Okay. But that's actually not why I brought this story up. The reason I brought this story up is because I have my top five ways of transporting fish. Salmon, yes, but fish otherwise. I've got a top five here. We're going to pull this off with no problem. So, all right, here we go. Presenting Stuart's top 5 ways of transporting fish. All right. Outside looking in is having a non-fatal accident with a salmon transport truck in which they spill into the creek, and most of them are fine. That's outside looking in. Number 5 is the Seneca National Fish Hatchery official salmon El Camino. If you scroll down that thing that you sent me, Carolyn, you'll see the El Camino down there. That is the number 5 way of transporting salmon. All right.
Stuart, that's got to be the number 1 way of transporting salmon in my
The
book.
thing is,
I guess this is your list. So
this is my list. I've got 4 more on here. Although, honestly, looking at these, it's probably number 3. It should have been number 3. But that is okay. All right, number 4. Number 4 way of transporting live fish Stop it. Well, that's not the number 4. Milk cans on horses. Milk cans on horses. Who put this in a list? This is ridiculous. All right, so this is what happened, people. There is a link right there. Trip the Light Fantastic. This is the number 4. This is the number 4. I am pasting it right now onto the YouTube. All right.
All
If you
right.
scroll down on that
I'm
list-
just going in the wrong order. Like, we didn't discuss this beforehand.
Well, I
We
tried.
discussed
It was
this too.
attempted to be discussed, and the exact quote is, "Don't discuss this with me 1 minute before the show begins." So that's fine.
There you go.
Could have discussed it earlier. All right. Anyway, number 4. If you scroll down on that, this is among our top five lists already. All right, number 3. Fish by train. There's a story here. Fish by rail. Titus, this looks like something that you put on here. So there's a history of this. How did fish, common carp, get introduced by train?
So, Stuart, we hear what you're showing.
Right? You
Yeah,
hear
it's
what I'm
really
showing.
loud.
You mean my fanfare is really loud?
No, it's a video.
I don't have a
think-
video.
I don't
I
see a
don't know what
video.
Okay. Maybe it's just me then.
It's just you. I got no video going.
Oh,
Let me double
yeah.
check.
This is a great
No.
episode. Okay.
I was gonna say
Fish by rail. Go back to it, man. Fish by rail. We got it.
Fish by rail. Where were we? Fish by rail. Yeah, who put this in a thing?
so I did actually. This
I
was a-
apologize. It seemed very Titus-esque.
Seemed
Hey, tell me
Titus-y.
about fish by train.
So I had to stick an invasive species in there,
Oh,
just
yes.
it's my brand. But essentially, the common carp, which is basically everywhere now, actually was introduced via trains in like the late 1800s across the US. There are some accounts of them basically just like dumping them out of trains as they would pass by on bridges and stuff. But this was really to help build, even though they're non-native, it was hoped that this would become a food source for Americans. But unfortunately, Americans at the time did not develop the taste for carp that the fisheries folks were hoping, and now we have common carp everywhere. So
Yes. Common carp and no eating.
and no
Um,
eating. Yeah.
Yeah, and you think about trains. I mean, a train, especially at the time, was the fastest way to move things around. It was also a very smooth ride compared to, other ways of transporting
Yeah,
fish.
the milk
So
carts and the horse.
yeah, I mean that's pretty bumpy. Those are bumpy rides. Fish don't like that. So yeah, trains. And actually, if you go to Michigan, there is what is it? It's in Odin, Michigan, at the Odin Fish Hatchery. They actually have one of those old Michigan train cars that
Really?
was used in their hatchery program. So you can check that out
Cool.
next time you're driving over to like Traverse City. It's up in
Yeah.
that part of the Lower Peninsula.
All right, and that takes us to our number 2 way of transporting fish, and that is dropping them from a plane. And this is one of our classic videos that we like. I think Carolyn may have even already shown it, but it's in Utah. One way that they stock salmon is they fly a little plane and they just drop the fish straight out the back into the river. And I assume, as with the truck wreck method, most of them survive. So that is excellent. And that takes us to the most important of all, number 1 way to transport fish. The salmon cannon. Everybody loves a good salmon cannon.
This brand
Salmon
new
cannon. Carolyn is now, she's totally, she is depressed for years. We have destroyed Carolyn's spirit with one poorly executed top 5 list. That's all it takes. All it takes. Her resolve has been unsteeled.
I mean,
For,
Stuart, we could have added numbers to the list.
Could have added numbers
but
to
really
the-
it was
I
all
wanted
so
the
straightforward.
surprise. I wanted the surprise of the, but maybe surprise is not the way. Oh, we got a surprise.
I think doing stuff live on air and surprises,
Yep.
they go really well together. And I
They
know
tend
I know
to.
that everyone who
Tend to.
tunes in for this live, they enjoy the hijinks that we get into.
I think it's one of
it
the
keeps
things.
them coming back for more.
Yep. Well,
I
maybe we'll
apologize, everybody. I apologize. Okay.
yes,
let's
that
do-
classic Carolyn too, apologizing for something that she did not do. Anyway,
Okay, so we did have an Ask Dr. Fish challenge this past month. It was to try a fish fry. I will admit that I did not try any local fish fries. However, I went down to Mammoth Cave, and some family members tried longfish from a side of the road thing. So I did have a question. I was like, is longfish, because I think they were selling longfish and squarefish. Do you think it just has to do with like how they're, is it a patty or is it like, I don't know. I see that Katie and Titus are both kind of like, yeah, I don't know what longfish is. I was like, it's probably one of those, like locally it means something. But anyway, they really enjoyed it. So that's what I'm calling the fish fry. If anybody from the audience participated in last month's challenge, feel free to share your comments. But Katie, were you able to enjoy any fish fries?
I was. So I actually was up in Milwaukee last week to visit some family for the Easter holiday. And we went to Lakefront Brewery, which, has great fish. But that wasn't the main draw why we went there. We actually went there because they are home to the Brew House Polka Kings.
the what?
Who play live. It's the Brew House Polka Kings who played live polka music as we were eating our fish fry, and I have to admit that really made the experience great fish, but even better atmosphere.
You were
That's
full
really
on
awesome.
Midwestern at that point.
Full on Midwestern
awesome.
in Milwaukee with a polka band eating a fish fry. It doesn't get better than that.
Right. Okay. Titus, I feel like you have probably killed all the fish fries in all the places in Wisconsin.
No, Katie, what would be more Midwestern than to let your colleague, Dr. Fish, know that you are just down the road in Milwaukee having a fish fry, but that is okay.
I know.
Yeah, so I'm actually I didn't have a single fish fry, but I'm going to take the buttered whitefish roll that I cooked up at the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel Sport Fishing Show. My colleague and I, Sharon Moen, she's our food fish outreach coordinator. We were invited to do a couple of cooking demos on their Usinger sausage sage, which is, hey, that's a great place to be. I can put that, Usinger sausage stage. That's got to go right in my resume /CV specifically. So we actually did 2 days of demos, and we wanted to highlight one of my things has been, I want we've got lobster rolls. Who cares? Lobsters are everywhere. Whatever. What about the whitefish roll? So, let's turn that into the Great Lakes sandwich of the summer. And so we had kind of competing whitefish rolls. I did a hot buttery whitefish roll. That's kind of how I prefer my lobster rolls. And Sharon did a cold, more of a whitefish salad with cooked whitefish and kind of spicy. So, delicious little sandwiches. And I'm gonna count that as a fish fry, even though it wasn't. Well, mine was fried in butter in a pan. So isn't that it's pan fried fish? Let's call that a fish fry.
Love
That
it.
also sounds delicious. Stuart, were you able to experience any?
So
fish
I
fry?
was not on the last episode of Ask Dr. Fish because I've been on some leave. I did not have a fish fry, but I had a number of French fries. I will report back on the fish fry situation a little bit later in the summer.
Cool. So, Katie, do you want to pick our challenge for next month?
Oh man, there's some really good ones, but I think my suggestion for our challenge next month is to visit a new body of water, or a body of water that's new to you, and share a picture of your adventure. So maybe get outside. Well, I was gonna say, if you're outside for the eclipse, please stay away from water. We don't need anyone falling in, but yeah, we'd love to see new bodies of water and new places around the Great Lakes and around wherever you live.
Awesome. Dark for 4 minutes. Don't fall into water.
Please
Yes.
don't fall into the water.
Well, and the fish, if you're in the lake during the eclipse, the voracious fish will likely nibble
Nope.
your tootsies.
skeletonize you in less than 4 minutes.
It'll happen, right? Like
it
in
could
Looney
happen.
Tunes or whatever. Yep. Yeah.
All right. So as everyone knows, we typically end with a game, and we don't have any comments today, probably because we just messed up so many ways. Yep, we'll try to do better.
We have a record on thumbs ups, though. That's cool.
Yeah. Okay, so if you guys have like a little piece of paper next to you,
yeah.
all three of you need to write down on different pieces of paper, write down yellow perch, round goby, muskellunge, and emerald shiner. And while you all are writing that, because I didn't have time to prep you beforehand,
so we get rid of the third one on the list there, is that right?
Yes, get rid of the third one. We'll just go with yes. All right. So we play games, and sometimes we do 20 questions, and sometimes we do various other things. And so today, sometimes we are influenced by what Carolyn has been watching on TV. If you have Peacock and you've watched The Traitors, I have been watching way too much of The Traitors. And this game is inspired by season 1, hosted by Alan Cumming. Which is one of the most ridiculous things I've ever seen, but it's also fantastic. Okay, so the way this is going to go is we have 4 choices. Our choices, again, are yellow perch, emerald shiner, round goby, and muskellunge. These are 4 Great Lakes species. Round goby was invasive, but it's well established, so I'm going to call it a Great Lakes species. And I'm going to ask you a question, and you guys just answer with whatever. Katie and Titus, your goal is to get the same answer as Stuart. So I'm going to ask a question like, which one of these is the tastiest to eat? We'll do that as a test round, okay? So like, which one of these is the tastiest to eat?
Okay, gotcha.
So hold up the paper. Don't show us yet. Just show us that you've picked your answer, okay? So Titus, you have to show us that you have picked your answer. Okay, everybody turn around and tell me what you had. It was round goby, yellow perch, and yellow perch. So we could say Katie and Titus probably picked yellow perch because yellow perch is actually tasty, but you have to be thinking about what Stuart is thinking, which is that round gobies
is the best food. Yes.
Yeah. All right. So we're going to do 3 rounds, and then, whoever has the most points at the end out of Titus and Katie wins. All right. So question number 1. Which species would you not want to meet in a dark alley? All right, go ahead. Turn them around. Muskie, emerald.
Darn it.
No point. No point.
Well, because it's shiny, right? And so then your dark alley would no longer be dark, and that would be a bummer.
All right. And Katie and Titus,
That's
why did you pick
absolutely
muskellunge?
Because they've got quite a lot of teeth, and I don't want to deal with that.
Yeah. I mean, even for us, like if someone threw a muskie at you in a dark alley and it hit you in the face, you could be covered in blood. They got a lot of teeth.
Right. I don't want. Yeah.
Okay, we gotta think
right.
like Stuart. Though.
Okay.
So
All
take
right.
your first instinct and then do the complete
Throw it in the
opposite.
trash. Yeah. Throw it in.
Question number 2. Which species would you like to have as a pet?
Are you allowed to reuse ones or once they're out there?
Yeah, you can reuse.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Oh,
Which
well, I
one
know
is
what.
it?
Yeah.
Those are your choices. So,
All right.
all right, go ahead, reveal. Round goby.
Oh my God.
Stuart, why would you like a yellow perch as a pet?
Well, because it also serves as a seat, right? You can just perch yourself right there on the pet. So not only do you have a pet, but you also have some nice living room furniture.
And Katie and Titus, why did you pick yellow perch as a pet?
Well, I
We
didn't pick yellow
picked
perch. I
round
picked
goby.
round
Oh,
goby.
sorry, you picked round goby as
We
a pet.
assumed Stuart would
Stay
go
on
with that
brand.
because it's
Yeah.
like his favorite fish, and then he could also like go over there, reach in, grab a snack.
I don't
which is
eat my pets.
perfect.
Yeah. That's just the difference between Carlton and Seilheimer households is
All right.
I don't tend to eat my pets.
All right, final question. Which of these 4 fish is the greatest Great Lakes fish?
Think like Stuart. Think like Stuart.
Think like Stuart.
Greatest Great Lakes fish. All right.
He's going to show up with his own.
Ready,
He's
go.
Yeah.
written a new one on there.
Oh,
He did. Oh, man. Of course he
Oh, goodness gracious.
Well,
All
do I
right.
get that right? Because
I
I,
think you
guessed
do.
that
I
he
think
would
that's-
actually
I think Titus
do
gets
something
that
totally
one.
different.
All
yeah.
right. So
I just
we'll
gets
get-
that one.
I wrote this one as the answer for I figured there'd be a taste question. And so I'd written this one down because I'm ornery. But then the
That
taste
wasn't
question,
Stuart breaks the rules, so Stuart is not the winner. So Katie, are you saying Titus?
I think
won?
Titus is the winner with
oh
that
wait, I
last
could have
one.
All right,
soapbox time
no,
if I
si-
just
no,
had
no,
this
no,
up
no.
instead?
60 seconds. 60 seconds. Go.
60 seconds. I love it. I'm going to encourage people to really jump in on our challenge for the coming month. Go check out a new water body. Go to your favorite water body as well. Take some pictures, share them widely. Tell us why you love that water body. I think I can. I go to Silver Creek 5 days a week to look for suckers, but there's some new parts of Silver Creek that I could look at. We look at Lake Michigan all the time. We love the Great Lakes, but there's new views. And really, what lake is? They say about rivers that you never step in the same river more than once. It's always changed. So really, show us your pictures. Go see some new bodies of water, and maybe go swimming.
Great.
There you go. And when you do that, you'll be able to find out about it on Ask Dr. Fish. Ask Dr. Fish is brought to you by the fine people at Illinois Indiana Sea Grant, Wisconsin Sea Grant, and Baby Dog Media. I apologize, Carolyn, I'm reading your line. Oh well. The show is produced and hosted by me, Stuart Carlton, Carolyn Foley, Dr. Fish, Katie O'Reilly, and of course, Dr. Fish, Titus Seilheimer.
The live broadcast is supported by Moti Agunbiade. The podcast version of the show is edited by Sandy
Svoboda.
Svoboda. The podcast artwork is by Ethan Kosak, and you can view his portfolio at ethankosak.com.
If you have questions for one of our Doctors Fish, send an email to askdrfish@gmail.com. Use the social media hashtag, quick edit job by me, hashtag AskDrFish, or call our fish hotline, 765-496-4474. Thanks for listening, everybody, and we'll see you live on Facebook at 11 a.m. Eastern on usually the second Monday of every even month. In between now, if you have fish questions, if you have science questions, if you have life questions, just ask Dr. Fish.
And I'm going to ask, so today we have a special outro. It's Katie, give us
It is the Brewhouse Polka Kings of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, playing us out.
Perfect.
Yes.